Well, hello again. This is Dr. Hungerford, and welcome to Module 1. I just wanted to quickly go over the assignments that are going to be for Module 1. First off, for the reading, you'll be going over Chapter 1. The module assignment is I'll just read it as verbatim in the syllabus. Write a leadership autobiography in which you reflect on your past and present leadership experiences, what people have had a significant impact on you. What leadership traits do they possess? What skills have you developed and how? What are your growth areas? And this needs to be submitted with a cover page and at least one full page APA format. And because we started on a Thursday, technically it's going to be due October 20th. As far as the discussion questions, there are going to be 4 questions. You need to respond to each. First question is, what is the relationship between leadership and power, leadership and influence? What does it mean to lead oneself? Third question, what do the emerging leadership approaches, authentic leadership, spiritual leadership, servant leadership, and adaptive leadership have in common? And 4, how access to technology empowered followers today? First post is due October 17th. Second post is the 20th. And also, we've already had mentioned earlier that your personal biography is going to be due on October 16th. One of the things I wanted to do is just look at some of the key points as you're going through chapter 1 of the reading. And you're going to initially go through sort of a history of leadership. At least they're going to go through about the last 100 to maybe 200 years, give or take a little bit. But what the purpose of the book that Norhaus is trying to do, and he's been doing this for 20 years, so he's pretty good, does a pretty concise job of this, but he explains each theory, but then most importantly, what he does, he explains how that theory can be used in real situations. And as you're going to go through it, he doesn't go through in as much as normal, and some of the pros and some of the cons of each leadership theory. And what he's going to be looking at is, as he's going through these different leadership theories and through the history, you're going to really see it's been really difficult over the last few hundred years in really defining what leadership is, because they're trying to figure out, is it a group process? Is it leveraging a combination of personalities and traits? Is it about group behaviors? Is it about power relationship between leaders and followers, which it is, but to what level? Is it about transforming followers to accomplish more than they naturally could do on their own? And is leadership really more about knowledge, skills, and abilities? In many ways, as you're going to find it, it's really a combination of all of it. The other thing I really want you to pay attention to in this is look at the timeline. They're going to go through the different decades of the 20th century on how different leadership theories evolve. But then they're going to focus on 4 emerging leadership theories in the 20th century. One of those is authentic leadership. And then let's see, and this is usually one of the books that's been out there for a while on this. And then another one is servant leadership. This is another pretty good book on that. And then servant leadership, adaptive leadership. Those are the ones that really have got the attention over the last 20 years. Servant leadership has sort of been the leading edge one that's got a lot of the attention, but they're starting to see some challenges with that as well too. So what Norhaus does, I like how he does this, as he identifies the components of leadership. And he does say leadership is a process. It is really, it involves influence of the leader to the followers. It also does occur in groups, and it does involve, common goals. One of the next points he's going to go to is really talking about the ethical responsibility of leadership. He doesn't really call it out, as a firm sort of topic, but you can see that this is sort of weaved in and throughout. And this is because of just a lot of the leadership, uh, I guess, missteps would probably be the best way to be able to put it over the last 20 or 30 years. But one of the things that he does is he goes to a guy named Ross. Ross, his work is really pretty good. It's leadership for the 21st century. And he does really probably the simplest and the most comprehensive justice to really defining leadership. And he defines leadership as a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. And that really does take all of the components that Norhouse had actually mentioned. But Norhouse, at this point in the book, he starts now sort of comparing different categories of leadership. So, and this is going to be really important to be able to look at. So, on figure 1-1, he's going to be talking about trait versus process leadership. He's also, this isn't in a figure, but assigned versus emergent leadership. You'll notice these are some of the questions that are going to be for the posting. So pay attention to these things. He also goes to Raven's a 1959 research work that on the different bases of power. You probably have heard of a lot of these different types of referent and power and position power and all of those. And just review those, but then think about those. How, in a leadership perspective, are these actually applicable? And note that power is a concept that people often associate with leadership. And probably the first person to do that was a gentleman named Thomas Carlyle, and in his 1841 book on heroes and hero worship, he looks at some of the great leaders in history and tries to how did they use power to be able to lead. And so this is really sort of the genesis of the academic uh, approach to leadership, all the way back to Thomas Carlyle. Um, so also understand these types and the bases of power. You're going to see that in table 1.1.2. Also, he refers to an author, Kellerman, who notes that a shift in leadership power over the last 40 years. The power used to be the domain of the leader, but now because of more access to technology and more educated workforces, that it's actually power is shifting more towards followers, which means then leaders need to respond differently. This was where position power and personal power, two of the six powers that Raven talks about in 1959, these are the ones that now are being talked about most as the two key power domains. Then they're going to be going and talking about leadership and coercion, basically the use of that power. There'll be some discussion on, was Hitler really a leader? I mean, he led people towards a common goal, um, and he influenced this group of individuals, the German people, to achieve a common goal. So, by Roast's definition, leadership was achieved. But this is where the ethical component actually comes in. And really, it's a manipulation and coercion of power. So they'll talk about that. And that's real important when it comes to the ethical aspect of things. One of the things that they're going to end up with is some research by Bennis and Nanas from 1985, because oftentimes in one of my other videos, I talked about management and leadership have, oftentimes been confused, and they really do a good job of defining the difference between the two. And I'm just going to read from them. To manage means to accomplish activities and master routines. To lead means to influence others and to create visions for change. To sort of clarify this, probably in a really succinct way. Managers are people who do things right. Leaders are people who do the right thing. So in closing, and Norhouse does not have this in his book, but I wanted to sort of share this with you because going into leadership, it's more complex than what one may think initially. So there's a book that was written in early, probably 2000 to 2004. It's called The Quest for a General Theory of Leadership. And one of the things that they noted is there really is no general theory of leadership. And in academia, there's always an overriding theory that sort of guides that school of thought. So they got the biggest thinkers, the biggest brains, the people that had the most experience in this area of research. And for about 4 years, they came together and they tried to come up with a general theory of leadership. And here are three conclusions that they came up with. They said leadership provides another way to ask very big questions about who we are, how we live together, and how we shape the course of history. We've determined leadership is ultimately a moral endeavor. Interesting thought. The study of leadership, the second point that they had, or conclusion, the study of leadership forces us to tackle the universal question about human nature and destiny. For those questions, there will probably never be a general theory. And it gets all the way back up to the moral endeavor aspect. The third conclusion they came with. All the authors knew the pieces of leadership studies, but they didn't know how to put them together. It's like they needed a navigator to show them how to put the pieces together. And I find that these are the greatest minds, and they're not too far off as far as when they did their research, pretty recent. And they've looked at all of the research over centuries and all the works and all the examples. And these are the conclusions that they came up with. So if you're confused, and boy, it'd be nice just to nail down concise definition that you could use in every situation, in every circumstance, regardless of who the leader was, what their giftedness, what their traits were, what the people were, whatever the objective would be. It'd sure be nice to be able to do this. And that's what makes leadership so fundamentally elusive, is it really is the components that Norhouse had put together is leadership does involve a process, but that process is going to be different in different situations and organizations. Leadership involves influence. Who are you influencing for what reason? How are you going to influence them? And it does occur in groups and it does involve common goals. But are those common goals ethical? Because obviously Hitler and Kim Jong-un, those people, they have goals, they're influencing people, they're doing it in groups, they have processes. So this is where you're going down to these authors of the quest for a general theory of leadership. They're saying it's a lot more complex. So don't get frustrated. Just take in the information and think of situations where you could see a particular leadership theory as working or could work, or like, here are some weaknesses and stuff. Then go to the next leadership theory, and you'll probably see a pattern where they're trying to address things, or they're trying to address things that the other previous theory didn't address, and they may come up with a modification to that or come up with a totally different approach. That's going to be really a general theme that you're going to look at when you're looking at all of the leadership theories over the course of this semester. So with that being said, those are the key things to be able to look at as you're reading the book. Remember the assignments. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me a text, give me a call, send me an email. Okay. Well, look forward to continue working for you as you get into module one here. And I'm also looking forward to reading your papers as well, too. Well, for now, good night.